West Indian cricket glory. A marvellous win for the West Indies. Can you remember what you've been most wrong about in your life?
Well, I didn't think Trump would get in or Brexit would happen, so I've pretty much stopped predicting things now. I'm out of the prediction game.
I think it's very wise. Stephen?
I must have some sort of sacred blind that gets pulled down over all my false predictions, but I am glad that you haven't said who's going to win the election, which a number of people do. They assume that because you've been involved in politics, you must have a view. And the big thing you learn there is that tomorrow could be dramatically different from today.
Yeah. Particularly with this election, which,
Well, you remember the .com phenomenon, that the effect of .com was completely opposite to what was predicted initially by the insiders in the political process.
And the initial reaction to what Mataria Ture said was quite different,
exactly,
wasn't it? Much more supportive to what...
You just got to be so aware that you move in a circle that may not be the circle that's really representative of all your fellow New Zealanders.
The Fonterra truck drivers stood down because it's dangerous when they sit down, because of their weight. Can I have your thoughts on this? The drivers who weigh more than 150 kgs told this week to step down from driving because seats cannot accommodate their weight safely. And a health and wellness program is being tailored to those who wish to continue driving. 50 drivers are in the 150 kg plus range.
Out of how many, does it say?
Oh, it did say. I would have to scroll through the voluminous amount of information to find out.
Don't worry.
It's sad that they're so unfit, but I just get annoyed that they're not given the choice. It's their lives. The poor Fonterra's in the meat and the sandwich. The law says that Fonterra is responsible, and it doesn't allow for any consent by people to live the way they want to live, and puts Fonterra in this position, which is embarrassing and demeaning to those people.
Well, yeah, because if there is an accident and the seatbelt fails to contain them, then Fonterra will be the ones with the health and safety.
Yeah, liability and hundreds of thousands of dollars of fines going all the way up the chain. But the law should never put people in that position. If the drivers know what they're doing and say, I'm prepared to run with this risk, that should be the end of it.
Nikki, what do you think of this? We don't mention it to be salacious. The publisher Usborne has apologised for a book it's published on puberty, Growing Up for Boys by Alex Frith, who's a well-known children's author in the UK. And the book's described by the publisher as a frank and friendly book offering boys advice on what to expect from puberty and how to stay confident, etc. Psychological, emotional changes and what to do about them. Here's the controversial paragraph. This is Frith. Girls have breasts for two reasons. One is to make milk for babies, and the other is to make the girl look grown up and attractive. Virtually all breasts, no matter what size or shape they end up when a girl finishes puberty, can do both things. So maybe not the way you would write this yourself as a young person's author. But does it warrant the chorus of criticism or not?
I think it does, and I think it's a prime example of the words you use really mattering. You know, it's not a reason women have breasts. I think if they'd said, and traditionally both men and women have found breasts a source of beauty and attractiveness, they'd have been on safe ground.
Okay.
But it's not a reason for them to be there.
All right, so the choice of words should have been rethought.
They need better writers.
Blame the editor, Nikki.
Blame the writer.
Okay, then. Thank you very much for coming in. Nikki Pellegrino has been on the panel. Stephen Franks, thanks for your company too.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
As always. Won't ask you who's going to win the election then. And thanks for your company, everybody. We are back tomorrow, and we are standing by for Checkpoint with John Campbell.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint we are in court as Moko Rangitohereri's mother gives emotional evidence at the inquest into her son's death in 2015. Two of the country's largest DHBs, one of them considered a very safe pair of hands, tells Checkpoint they're struggling to reach budget targets for the financial year. And one of them says they feel under real pressure to make cuts they can't find. Cyclone Harvey paralyses America's fourth largest city, claiming at least 11 lives, and is set to be the costliest natural disaster in US history. Fonterra steps down two overweight truck drivers following revelations their seats can't accommodate their weight safely, plus a day on the road with Jacinda Ardern.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat in Aho. Moko Rangitoherere's mother has given emotional evidence at the Rotorua inquest into her son's death in 2015. The 3-year-old died after being abused by his caregivers, Tanya Shayla and David Hairewa, who were sentenced last year to 17 years in jail for his manslaughter. His mother, Nicola Deli-Paki, was in Auckland with another child receiving treatment at Starship Hospital at the time of Moko's abuse and death. She told the inquest this afternoon that if authorities had concerns about her children, they knew where to find her.
They did not once contact the Auckland DHB social workers that work at Starship to gather evidence about me and my background for the investigation. If they had, they would have been notified by the Auckland DHB social workers, and Moko would still be alive, Your Honour.
Nicola Deli-Paki says she placed Moko and his sister with Shayla because she had known her for 15 years and assumed the children would be safe. The Ministry of Social Development says not everyone receiving superannuation has to sign an annual declaration about their personal circumstances. Questions have been raised about how Winston Peters continued to be overpaid for a period of years when annual declarations have to be made. The Ministry says superannuitants without personal earnings who receive support such as the accommodation supplement or an allowance for permanent medical condition do have to make annual declarations. So do those with no other form of income who claim the single rate. But it says other superannuitants are not contacted regularly to reconfirm their circumstances. The Prime Minister has spoken to his Australian counterpart about the threat posed by North Korea, but says no military options were discussed. The United Nations Security Council has condemned North Korea's firing of a ballistic missile over Japan yesterday, but has stopped short of further sanctions. Bill English says he contacted Malcolm Turnbull because Australia has a close relationship with both the United States and Japan.
We both have a common concern that really when the pressure's on, we need to see the US and particularly China acting in concert to bring this, to relieve the tension with some sort of diplomatic initiative rather than a military one.
Bill English. The Labour leader, Jacinda Ardern, says she hopes all world leaders will take a calm, considered approach to the situation.
Of course, what we're seeing with North Korea is incredibly concerning. I think taking that multilateral response, using the United Nations as our mouthpiece, our voice, but making sure that New Zealand's voice is heard in that environment.
The Labour leader, Jacinda Ardern. The Human Rights Commission is welcoming the recommendation of a United Nations committee that the government hold an independent inquiry into the systemic abuse of children and adults with disabilities while in state care from 1950 to 1990. Earlier this month, the Race Relations Commissioner, Susan Devoy, appeared before the committee on the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination in Geneva. Dame Susan says she welcomes its recommendation. She says those who were responsible for abuse should be held accountable, and lessons must be learnt from the past to ensure such things can never happen again. Ariana Grande fans have been told to leave their bags at home before heading to the American pop star's first ever Auckland concert this weekend. Spark Arena says no bags of any size will be allowed. 22 people were killed at the end of Grande's concert in the English city of Manchester in May when a suicide bomber detonated a homemade bomb he was carrying in a bag. People coming to Saturday night's performance will also have to put keys, phones and ticket in clear Ziploc bags before going through security checks. Wellington Airport is about to become the first in New Zealand to welcome Uber drivers. A dedicated pickup area will be available at the airport from Friday, now that an agreement has been reached with the rideshare company. The airport will charge Uber drivers drop-off and pickup fees of $3 a ride, the same as taxi drivers are charged. The agreement follows the passing of the Land Transport Amendment Bill, under which ride-sharing services like Uber are recognised as part of the country's land transport framework. It's 5:04. To sport, and England are no doubt sensing a rare chance to beat the Silver Ferns in Auckland tonight. The home side are without veteran shooter Maria Tutaia, who's on bereavement leave, and they're also coming off a wobbly first-up Quad Nations win over South Africa in Brisbane at the weekend. Coach Janine Southby is demanding a much better defensive effort from her players tonight, given that England lost by only 4 goals to Australia in their opening game.
England are very experienced, particularly in the defensive end. They've got some players that have been around a very long time and they're quality players. They'll be very physical, so it will be a pretty full-on game. And for us, it's about being able to take that and to then be able to make great decisions under pressure.
Silver Ferns coach Janine Southby. Third seed Roger Federer has survived a scare in the first round of the US Tennis Open. He was pushed to 5 sets by 19-year-old American Frances Tiafoe, but eventually took the match 4-6, 6-2, 6-1, 1-6, 6-4 to keep his hopes of a 20th Grand Slam tournament win alive. Earlier top seed and world number 1 Rafael Nadal dismissed unseeded Serbian Dusic Lajic in straight sets to stay on course for a potential semi-final showdown with Federer. Germany's Angelique Kerber became the first defending women's champion to lose in the first round since 2005, when she was knocked out by Japanese teenager Naomi Osaka. That's the news.
Snakes in a Bangladesh home.
The water had come into her house up to about knee or waist level, and suddenly the kids started screaming, "Snake, snake!" The sea snakes had come into the house.
Houston residents told to leave home.
This is completely unprecedented. There's so many other things to go along with this flood, so they're not entirely sure where the water is going to go or how much damage it's going to do.
And closer to home, Auckland is evicted.
Why would you put them into somewhere else and they have to go through that whole process? It's just going to cause them a huge injustice.
Safe as houses. Guy and Aspinall and Susie Ferguson, morning reports, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, Dame Diane Robertson on protecting our personal data in the face of insatiable demand for it, what thousands of New Zealanders say matters most to them. And after 10, wildlife writer Abigail Tucker on the apex predator on your lap, why we love and or hate cats. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, occasional showers, some heavy, with possible thunderstorms today. Coromandel Peninsula, Waikato, Waitomo, Taumaranui, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Rain with heavy falls spreading south, turning to showers this evening. Isolated thunderstorms possible about Coromandel until tonight. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloud and occasional drizzle spreading into Gisborne by evening, turning to showers with possible thunderstorms about the ranges tomorrow. Taranaki, Taihape, Whanganui to Kapiti, cloud increasing and scattered rain spreading southwards this afternoon and evening. Nelson and Buller, cloudy, scattered light rain, mainly from tonight. Wairarapa, Wellington, Marlborough, Canterbury and coastal Otago. Cloudy with periods of drizzle or rain from this evening. Westland, Fiordland and the remainder of Otago and Southland, fine today, mainly fine tomorrow with areas of morning fog and widespread high cloud. And the Chatham Islands today, cloudy periods and occasional drizzle. Tomorrow, rain with some heavy falls, easing to a few showers in the afternoon. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much, Katrina, and thank you everyone for being with us. Coming up on the program tonight, making budget. 2 large DHBs tell us how tough it is to live within their means. One of them, despite being known for their ability to make ends meet. Also tonight, we're out on the campaign trail, of course. But first, the brutal death of Moko Rangitohereri, who suffered prolonged and sadistic abuse at the hands of his caregivers in 2015. Sorry, we're just going to change plans and we're going to lead with the DHB story. Yes, sorry, the Moko story is not ready. So we're going to move instead to an ongoing Checkpoint investigation. Thank you for bearing with us. 2 of the country's largest DHBs have told Checkpoint they're struggling to reach budget targets for the financial year, with a Waikato board member telling us staff are being told to find savings they can't possibly achieve. And Auckland's DHB chairman, Lester Levy, has told us making ends meet is becoming very challenging, and they're now considering the consequences of the steps they need to take in order to achieve a no budget deficit. Now, all of this, of course, follows weeks of investigations by Checkpoint into DHBs in crisis. But Waikato and Auckland aren't in that category. Auckland has been celebrated for its ability to come in on budget for years, and Waikato was cited on Checkpoint last week as addressing its deficit even down to zero. But one board member, who we're beginning with, wants to know how they're going to get it down from the level he thinks it's actually sitting at.
Look, it's $32.5 million. That's what we've been told. We have asked our management to go away and see what savings could be made.
That's Dave McPherson, Waikato DHB board member. As you heard, its initial projection, a $32.5 million deficit for the 17-18 year. But that was deemed too much, so they're currently looking for savings. So what kind of pressure do you and the board feel under to make these savings?
Well, I think we're being used as pawns in the election at the moment.
What does he mean? Put simply, as the Canterbury and Southern DHBs get headline after headline for the pressure they're under, Waikato is shaping up to be that most valuable DHB in election year, one that can come in on budget. Here's their chairman, Bob Simcock, on Checkpoint last Thursday.
Our intention is to deliver a break-even budget to the government. Clearly our initial work through the budget identifies significant pressures, but we will be presenting a break-even budget.
That's their intention, but as Bob Simcock told our producer Bridget Burke, their original projection was that deficit.
32, I think, would have been the figure.
When the DHB showed an initial deficit of $32 million, what was Ministry of Health's instruction to you?
I wouldn't take it as an instruction. There was a clear indication that we're expected to meet our normal obligations, which is to live within our means.
And so admirable was the chairman's intention that the minister picked up on it an hour later.
Bob Simcock, the chair of Waikato DHB, was on your show an hour ago saying, well, they started with a large deficit. You chip away at it over time. You look at how you can, deal with some of these back office functions, continue to focus on providing the frontline services at the same time as reversing a deficit. I mean, this year, the Waikato DHB is actually going to be in surplus.
Jonathan Coleman on Checkpoint last Thursday night. DHB staff and other board members were listening, and some were aghast. They've contacted us, but Dave McPherson was prepared to speak on the record and on air.
So there's quite a bit of political pressure coming on us. The reality is that our staff are being told to find savings that they just can't possibly achieve. So that puts pressure on them, which then puts pressure on us. And we're having arguments, quite literally, within our board about whether we should put in a budget that's a hope or put in a budget that's a reality. And that's the sort of argument we're having on our board at the moment.
And are you under pressure, do you think, at a political level and or a ministry level to effectively put in a budget that's a hope?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, Dave McPherson can understand the pressure the Waikato DHB is under to do that, but...
My view is that we're being irresponsible if we're putting in a budget where we can't actually demonstrate and prove, if you like, that we can achieve savings. I didn't get elected to a board to be told to sort of pass a budget that was just hopeful.
Of course, this kind of toing and froing, hunting for efficiencies in the back rooms the minister talked about, is standard procedure. But the thing Dave McPherson is most bewildered by is that a $32.5 million deficit has suddenly somehow been reduced to zero without the required savings even having been agreed to.
I was quite annoyed to hear the minister sort of glibly say that we'd get back from $32.5 million. We haven't even had the meeting of the board to discuss this yet, and it's not scheduled for another 3 or 4 weeks.
Dave McPherson in Waikato, where they're, quote, arguing about whether they can achieve the savings required. We wanted to see break-even without argument, without pressure, so we went north.
The number one issue is, and the number one risk is, how do you keep people safe? And how do you do that while you're trying to balance all these issues about productivity targets, financial targets, and the like. And it's quite a tough ask at the moment. I must say that Auckland's a $2 billion revenue organisation per year, and when you're trying to land that on a no-deficit budget, it's often a bit of a white-knuckle ride in the last few weeks of the year.
That's Lester Levy, who has not turned his back on years of reliably getting the job done in a fashion that usually left the boat unrocked, but who finds himself patrolling the increasingly difficult intersection of health's supply and demand.
So, it's very challenging times.
Why? We'll return to Auckland shortly, but let's head to Wellington, where an internal Capital and Coast DHB paper prepared for the board and endorsed by its CEO puts it very plainly indeed.
The DHB is facing significant financial pressures and has been challenged over a long period of time to achieve better financial outcomes.
That was in May in Wellington, our third largest city. In July, in our second largest city, the Canterbury DHB warned that addressing its financial pressures may force it to make
significant service cuts of unprecedented scale.
And back in our largest city, Auckland, after a long, tough winter in terms of patient demand, arguably the fiscally safest board chair in the health sector is speaking like this.
I have been very clear with my chief executives during times such as that. They should have a very low threshold for deprioritising targets and for letting the budget take a hit if it has to, because in those kind of situations we have to make safety trump over everything else. But it's been very, very challenging and quite difficult, and realistically I have been concerned and I have expressed that concern.
Who to?
To the Minister.
We asked Lester Levy for an interview because we'd mostly been hearing from DHBs in crisis, Southern and Canterbury in particular, places where the stretch had become a snap. We wanted a different perspective, so we went to a chairman who likes his balance sheets written in black.
We've managed to have no deficits in the time that I've been there.
Which is a record Lester Levy's proud of. But we'd paused him at the end of that sentence, so let's hear how he continued.
But it has got more difficult, and I'll explain this to you in this way. 6-7 years ago, we used to rate the savings programs that we were required to make in order to meet the financial targets as whether there was a low risk of making it, that is pretty easy to do, or a moderate risk or a high risk. And they were all pretty easy to do in those days, and they were more around efficiency and waste reduction. And so therefore they had no real consequences in the organisation other than making it more effective and using our funding, taxpayer funding, more effectively. Slowly but surely, over the years, they've become harder to achieve, and I guess that makes sense because you're starting to squeeze the inefficiency out of the organisation. Just remembering these are complex, multi-layered organisations. But I'd say it is different because it has become much tougher, and this year is difficult and very challenging. We aren't quite there yet, so we are aiming to return a no-deficit budget, but right at the moment we're looking at the consequences of the steps we would need to take in order to do that.
Lester Levy doesn't often talk like that in public. So, the costs that can be cut have been. Winter has been tough. Population-based funding hasn't always kept up with Auckland's rapidly growing population. And now a DHB that's not in crisis is starting to face the same kinds of choices as those that very publicly are.
And whilst clearly somebody like myself reports to the Minister of Health, and then we have obligations to the Minister and to the Ministry, we owe our duty of care to our population and our staff, our population for safe services and effective access, and our staff for their well-being. And I think we're getting to the point where that is being challenged, and I've been pretty frank and open about this.
That's Lester Levy. We'll return to him and to Auckland shortly. But what does the Minister want of his DHB board chairs? A letter dated 16th of December last year offers some answers.
Letter of expectations for DHBs and subsidiary entities 2017-18.
This one was addressed to Bob Simcock, the chair of the Waikato DHB, although we didn't obtain it from him or from his office. It contains a section entitled, in bold,
Living Within Our Means.
And it's very explicit indeed.
DHBs need to budget and operate within allocated funding and have clear plans to improve year-on-year financial performance.
Signed, Jonathan Coleman, Health Minister. It continues.
You and your board must monitor and hold your chief executive accountable against these expectations.
And how does the Minister suggest the board do this? He's very clear. He expects them to, quote,
make efficiency gains.
Which brings us back to Dave McPherson on the board of the Waikato DHB. He hadn't seen that letter, so I read that part to him. And in it he says that he has absolutely no doubt the board will continue to make efficiency gains to ensure better performance. Can you make efficiency gains without endangering patient care?
No, I don't believe we can. We've struggled right through the year to try and break even, which in a financial sense we did. At the same time, John, Waikato DHB has got the highest number of emergency department presentations of any DHB in the whole country, and that sort of figure has been getting slowly but steadily worse during the year. And that's one of the sorts of effects. We can't fund GPs enough for people to be able to afford their care, so they wait until the situation gets dire, and then they come into the emergency department. Huge pressure on that department in our hospital, and the rest of the hospital is not able to help them enough to sort of get people to flow through, if you like, from ED through into the specialist care areas that they need. It's quite that's putting massive pressure on patients and staff, and I think it's going to break soon if it keeps going like that.
That is Dave McPherson, who is on the Waikato DHB board. Now, the board chair is Bob Simcock. He was unavailable to appear on Checkpoint tonight. Lester Levy raises a fascinating point about population-based funding. So that is set as a projection. But, of course, Auckland in particular has a very, very fast-growing population, which means that DHBs often end up with way less money than there are people in their catchment area. That is a subject we will return to at a later date. Let's go now to Rotorua and the brutal death of Moko Rangi, who suffered prolonged and sadistic abuse at the hands of his caregivers in 2015. Today, the inquest into the 3-year-old's death began in the Rotorua District Court in front of Coroner Wallace Bain. There, Moko's mother said she did everything in her power to keep her children safe. She talked about the domestic violence she suffered in her relationship with Moko's father and made an emotional plea to others in similar situations: leave and never go back. Eva Corlett reports.
Moko Rangi died after 2 months of abuse by the 2 people who were meant to be caring for him and his sister. He had been left in Taupo with Tanya Shayla and David Hairewa, while his mother was in Auckland Starship Hospital looking after another child. He died on August 10th, 2015, after suffering horrendous injuries from beatings and abuse, and Shayla and Hairewa were sentenced to 17 years in jail for Moko's manslaughter last year. Nicola Dalipaki was asked in court what checks she had made on Shayla before leaving her children in her care.
Okay, well, I didn't do a police background check, and I didn't ask all the social workers what was going on with the mental health. I just made an assumption, as knowing her from previous early childhood, that she would be safe opposed to putting them into a gang life.
She said they had known each other for 15 years.
We had lunches at the lake. We'd spent, I think, a Christmas together at the lake. Shouted them a barbecue, bought presents for her kids.
Nicola Dalipaki said she was desperate to find somewhere for the children because they were not allowed to stay with her in the hospital. She said she was trying to find a better situation for the family, and placing the 2 children with Shayla was a last resort. But Ms Dalipaki said if the authorities had concerns, they knew where to find her.
But they did not once contact the Auckland DHB social workers that work at Starship to gather evidence about me and my background for the investigation. If they had, they would have been notified by the Auckland DHB social workers, and Moko would still be alive, Your Honour.
She said she was in a complicated situation, trying to find safe housing for herself and her children, and if she had been less harshly judged, her son would still have been alive today. Ms Dalipaki was asked about what she would say to others who are in violent relationships.
Start planning, start procrastinating privately, organise all your personal information, your ID, money, any identification that you will need in the future. Have an emergency plan. Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Moko's paternal grandmother also gave evidence to the inquest and asked why various agencies had not listened to her concerns. Nicola Rangitohirere had offered to have the child, but their mother rejected the offer. Mrs Rangitohirere said she had been let down by Child, Youth and Family.
You didn't help me either. All I basically got was that there was an investigation, and putting my hand up to have them meant nothing. Please tell me why no one bothered to check on them after complaint was made against the mother, just to ensure their well-being. Tania had 4 children of her own.
The inquest will continue tomorrow. For Checkpoint, ko Eva Corlett, tēnei.
Let's go to the US now, where President Donald Trump has visited Texas to survey damage from the first major natural disaster to test his leadership in a crisis, as a record rainfall from Tropical Storm Harvey lashed Houston and tens of thousands of people fled deluged homes. The storm, turning slowly in the Gulf of Mexico, has brought catastrophic flooding to Texas, killing at least 11 people and paralysing Houston, America's 4th largest city. As Bridget Burke reports, damage is expected to run well into the tens of billions of dollars, making it one of the costliest US natural disasters in history.
A man stranded in floodwaters in the eastern suburbs of Houston waves a white flag, calling to be saved. Thousands like him have already been rescued, with police, firefighters and the National Guard working around the clock to locate those still marooned by the unprecedented flooding. It's the biggest rain event from a tropical storm in the country's history, with a year's worth of rainfall in just a few days continuing to pound the city. Officials in Harris County said reservoirs built to handle drainage water were beginning to overflow. They urged residents to evacuate as they released water to alleviate pressure on 2 dams. Jessica Dodson was one of them.
It's a lot of water and a lot of people do not want to leave their homes, and it's up to here to me. So I had to wear my life jacket, but once you get in there, it's just a lot of debris everywhere, but it's a lot of water and a lot of people need help back there.
Men, women and children along with their pets were rescued from the floodwaters by boats and trucks and taken to dry land.
Does anybody have somebody picking them up? Coordinate. Do you have anybody picking them up? Yes. Oh, you do? Yes.
Those who had nowhere to go were taken to one of the city's evacuation centres, which are now providing shelter to more than 20,000 homeless and are nearing capacity. 20-year-old Jose Gonzalez was one of the evacuees.
It's bad, man. It's terrible. It's real bad. The water's like it's almost, I want to say up to my knees, just about, but it's really bad over there.
What you expected?
No, not at all. Nobody expected this.
Touring an emergency centre in Houston for the first time since Hurricane Harvey hit, US President Donald Trump pledged support for those who had lost their homes.
Probably there's never been anything so expensive in our country's history. There's never been anything so historic in terms of damage and in terms of ferocity as what we've witnessed with Harvey.
Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner said more shelters would be set up.
We need additional assistance, and so we've asked them to provide supplies and cots, food for an additional 10,000 individuals.
The slow-moving storm has so far claimed the lives of at least 11 people. Among the dead, Houston police officer Steve Perez, who drowned on his way to work after driving into an underpass 5 metres deep in water. An emotional police boss, Arte Azevedo, said conditions were so dangerous the Navy was forced to abandon their search for him.
So we couldn't find him, and once our dive team got there, it was too treacherous to go under and look for him. So we made a decision to leave officers there waiting until the morning, because as much as we wanted to recover him last night, we could not put more officers at risk for what we knew in our hearts was going to be a recovery mission.
Animal shelters across the state are at capacity as people evacuated their homes with dogs, cats and birds. The rising waters have also brought some unexpected visitors, as Missouri City resident Arlene Kelch discovered.
So here's the gator moving along. You can see him just kind of taking his time. He's inside of the fence again. And now it looks like there's not only him, but now him. So, not too far from just climbing on into the backyard and getting right here to the patio.
Curfews are in place across the city with more heavy rain expected in the coming days. For Checkpoint, Bridget Burke.
You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you so much for being with us. Coming up on the program, Fonterra steps down 2 overweight truck drivers. Following revelations their seats may not accommodate their weight safely. We hear from the union and Fonterra. A day on the campaign trail with Jacinda Ardern. Nona is next with business news, and I think we're looking at building consents tonight, right? And a reduction in numbers. All of that coming up before now and 6. The latest on North Korea and what on earth it is up to, which is not an easy thing to work out. But with the 5:30 headlines and exactly 5:30 now, here's Katrina Ardern.
Wow. Moko Rangitoherere's mother has given an emotional plea to others suffering domestic violence to get out and never look back. Nicola Dalipaki was giving evidence in the Rotorua inquest into the death of her 3-year-old son. He was beaten to death by Tanya Shayla and her partner David Hairewa. Ms Dalipaki told the court that she left her children with the pair and was trying to find a safe place for her family following a violent relationship with Moko's father. A decision by Hawke's Bay Regional Council to abandon the failed Ruitaniwha Dam project has disappointed farmers, but they're also pleased to finally have certainty over the project. The dam would have required a land swap between the Department of Conservation and the Council, but the Supreme Court put an end to that, ruling the land swap was unlawful. Federated Farmers says climate change-related drought is a growing problem for the region, and farmers may have to band together to create small dams. The Prime Minister has spoken to his Australian counterpart about the threat posed by North Korea, but says no military options were discussed. The United Nations has demanded that North Korea halt further missile launches and abandon its nuclear program, following yesterday's firing of a ballistic missile over Japan. North Korea has said the test was in response to military drills by the US and South Korea and is the first step of its military operation in the Pacific. The Ministry of Social Development says not everyone receiving superannuation has to sign an annual declaration about their personal circumstances. Questions have been raised about how Winston Peters continued to be overpaid for a period of years when annual declarations have to be made. Wellington Airport is about to become the first in New Zealand to welcome Uber drivers. A dedicated pickup area will be available at the airport from Friday, now that an agreement has been reached with the rideshare company. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. More on North Korea coming up. But Nona, as promised, sitting beside me, Nona Peltier with business news. And we are looking at building consents. The number issue dropped in July. What does that mean? What's going on, Nona?
Well, actually, it fell just a little bit, so less than 1%. And it fell a little bit from the month before as well. So what are we talking about, month to month, or are we talking about both, year on year? Year on year.
Okay.
So what this actually is showing, though, is that the number of consents is actually sort of flatlined. And that is what economists had been predicting when we got to the sort of the top of capacity. So we've reached this point where really there is no more.
So when you talk about top of capacity, you're talking about the workers who are required.
There's only so much that you can do, and if so, you've got 30,000 consents, so that's fine. But that's really the top end.
All, right?
We're not going to get 100,000, even though we may need 100,000. That's what we're going to have, and so the market is saying, well, okay, this is where we're sitting right now, and this is where we're going to continue to sit until capacity increases, and that's not going to happen anytime soon.
So the very real political discussions that are taking place about supply, this is actually a real window into what's going on.
Yeah, because we've been hearing this for a while. It's not just the skills shortage. It's also, of course, the materials you need. We've seen that reflected in Fletcher Building. They got caught out. Metro Performance Glass also having trouble. Steel and tube. And so it's right, it's right across these sectors. It's whether you're a supplier or you're a builder or what have you, you're going to have some trouble. And that's from the contractors down to the subcontractors. Really, it's a struggle. So when you've got the boom, you've got some bust situations too. And right now we're looking at a situation where the supply is still there's still demand for houses, but they can only be built so fast. We do have capacity constraints. And that is a reality that everyone has to kind of come to grips with, whatever your view is on how you're going to stimulate the market.
Or whatever your view is about how many houses you're going to promise are going to be built, right?
Yeah, you can only build so many. There's only so many hands at the pump.
Okay, fascinating. Thanks, Nona. What else is happening?
Well, we also had some interesting things. The Reserve Bank governor, outgoing governor, Governor Wheeler, he's leaving at the end of September, and he gave a speech this afternoon about the reflections of his stewardship. It didn't really amount to very much, though. It was mostly just, you know, the good things that the Reserve Bank has done to contain, you know, the economy in a good position, financial stability. Still thinks inflation's a very good way of, you know, setting out monetary policy. Thinks that the loan-to-value ratios have been a very good thing. Does think that debt-to-income restrictions might be a good thing to have in the toolbox too. And of course, he'll be leaving at the end of September, so we're going to have a temporary governor.
Right. Yeah, his
and then later on, I guess after acting Governor Spencer leaves, we'll get a new governor maybe March next year.
Is anyone listening to Graham Wheeler? I'm not saying that's not a low blow.
Well, okay, I could just tell you the market didn't really react.
No.
So, and I think that's partly because really nothing he said changed anything.
No.
It didn't change the view of the market. So the dollar is steady at 72.6 US cents, 90.9 Australian and 56.1 pence. Now the Australian dollar, we did drop a little bit against the Australian, but that's because across the Tasman there was you know, quite a lot of upbeat data on construction there, so that was good for the Australian market, and that was a little bit reflected in our currency value. Also, overall, the US dollar's rebounded as some concerns have eased over what's going on with North Korea, the big question mark for the region, and so stocks recovered, and certainly here at home, our index rose 0.5% by 37 points to 7,775.
Thank you so much, Nona. Nona Peltier beside me in the Auckland studio doing business. The union for 2 Fonterra truck drivers stood down from their jobs for being overweight. So the men have been humiliated. The drivers, who have collectively worked for the company for about 20 years, have been stood down until they lose weight after the company cited health and safety issues regarding seats on 2 models of trucks. Now, in a moment, we'll hear from Fonterra itself, but first, Edendale's union delegate, Mark Holmes, described the situation.
Well, 3 weeks ago, John, they were tapped on the shoulder and told they weren't allowed to drive because the company thought they were overweight, according to the seat restrictions on the Volvos and the Scania trucks. There was pretty much nothing around it at that point. So this thing that's happening now, the documentation and the policy that's come out is done retrospectively. So these guys have been 3 weeks off the road. Fonterra is just now announcing the policy, but there's nothing in around to support these guys.
Okay, so wait a second. Forgive me for interrupting. 3 weeks off the road. Have they been on full pay?
Oh, yes.
So they've just been at home doing nothing?
No, they've been sitting in the canteen doing nothing at the site, watching their colleagues go out in trucks and watching other people drive their trucks out the gate. So
in a way that would be, what, reasonably embarrassing for them?
Oh, humiliating. Absolutely humiliating. And since it's hit the media in the last 2 days, both these guys have been vilified on social media because everyone's listening to the Fonterra story. And don't get me wrong, what the company wants to do for these guys is awesome. I support it 100%. But the way they've treated these 2 guys is absolutely reprehensible.
Can you explain specifically what is reprehensible about the treatment? What have Fonterra done?
Well, they've pulled them off the road. They've given them no alternate work, and so they've just been sitting there. Up until yesterday, there was no plan going forward around putting them into a Weight Watchers program or into a gym program, which I understand they want to do, which is great, and again, I support it. But they've done this too soon. They're now they're using it as a health and safety thing. I don't believe it is a health and safety thing. I believe it's an employment issue now. And poor old Scania and Volvo, if 150 kilograms is the most anybody can sit on that seat, they're not selling more trucks. But turn the trucking industry on its head.
So what needs to happen to get this right?
Well, it's very simple. These guys need to be put back in their trucks and we develop a plan about losing weight for them going forward. All they want to do is drive again, and feel like they're important, give them some sense of self-worth back and give them some dignity back.
What's their health like generally? Do you know them?
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, I've been dealing with them very closely over the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, and what sort of nick are they in?
They're in pretty good nick. They're big boys. No, there's no denying that, and they don't deny that themselves. But they've passed the company medicals, apart from the weight. That's the only issue. Blood pressure's fine, eyesight's fine, breathing's fine. So there's no immediate risk of them just dropping dead with a heart attack. No more than you and me, really.
And how long have they been with Fonterra for? How long have they been driving with Fonterra for?
Oh, one's been with us for 7 years, and the other one's probably close to 13 years. So, you know, they're not long, short-term drivers, and you've got to remember that they were both employed at this weight. So, you know, it sort of smacks in the face a bit.
So they haven't put on weight during their 7 and 13 years with the company?
No, they're about the same as they were when they were employed.
Mark, have they broken any seats or done anything that might indicate that they're at risk in the cabs?
No, not a thing. Not a thing. Yeah, and Volvo and Scania, neither of them have said that those seats won't perform as well as at 180 kgs as they do at 150 kgs.
It's Mark Holmes, who's the union delegate there at Edendale. Fonterra's General Manager for Transport Logistics is Barry Moko. I asked him why the men were stood down.
As a result of some investigations around the safety of our drivers, the truck manufacturers have said to us there is a weight rating limit on the seats that your drivers are in, and if you are beyond that weight, the safety functions of the seat may not necessarily perform to standard in a serious accident. So potentially someone above that weight limit could get more seriously hurt in an accident than an equivalent person under the limit.
May not necessarily. So in the circumstances of may not necessarily, was it really necessary to stand these men down and kind of sit them in the canteen where, on the face of it, they've been humiliated, really?
I don't think that's right. My view is that once you know that there is a hazard to your people, you have a real duty of care, morally and legally, to not put them in a situation where they potentially may get hurt. So first thing is, take them out of the zone where they may be hurt more than somebody else, and then work with them to, okay, so how do we work with you on this and get you back into the role that you really like? These are really good people. They have, in most cases, worked for us for a number of years.
Do you know them? We
want them to keep working for us. Not these guys personally, but I know of them, and certainly I'm in close contact with the local management down there. Look, we have a really great bunch of drivers across New Zealand. They are a really good bunch of people.
So they've got roughly 20 years between them, right? Well, 7 and 13 years roughly as drivers. They haven't just suddenly put this weight on, have they?
No, they haven't. But what we have become aware of in the last few days is what the limit is on the seats. So
it's not a limit, is it, Barry? It's not like the seat breaks or the seatbelt doesn't work.
No, the seat won't break, but the seat, potentially the safety features, because it's an integral seat belt and it's mounted to the floor of the cab, potentially the safety features don't do what they need to do.
So they've been sitting in the canteen for 3 weeks?
No, they've been sitting in the canteen. So this all happened last week. So the immediate thing is, and bear in mind at this time of the year, not all our drivers are out on the road. We've only got a little over 400 trucks on the road currently out of a fleet of 500. So not everyone's driving. So what we said is, hey, safety's sake, you guys can't go out because we're putting you in harm's way, and now we'll sit down and work on a plan with you of where do we go from here, what can you do in the meantime. So there are 2 guys that are well over the limit, but let's work with you. Let's do what we can then to get you back on the road, and in the meantime we will work through what the other opportunities are. We're not about to part company with them. We want to work with them and get them back in place.
You're not about to part company with them because under the law you can't, can you? You can't sack somebody because
of their weight.
Well, you
wouldn't do it morally.
Okay, great.
That's just wrong. They're good people.
Yeah, okay. And actually what the union is saying is, look, we agree with Fonterra's desire to make these men healthier. And so everyone, I think you're singing from the same song sheet as the union there. It's just, did you have to take them off the road in such a dramatic and humiliating fashion? Wouldn't it have been possible to implement the kind of health changes you're talking about, which are acknowledged as good, without doing so in such a undignified way?
It's a very difficult and sensitive conversation to have, regardless of the outcome. But at the end of the day, the duty of care is to not put them in harm's way. So if you are beyond that weight limit, in good conscience, you can't put them out there and put them at risk. You owe it to your people to look after them. You just can't put them in harm's way. So what next is for those two guys, we work through a plan, we work through what redeployment and other roles looks like until such point as they can get back on the road again.
And that means losing some weight, right?
They need to get down to that limit. Otherwise, again, you can't put them back into a situation where they're at greater risk.
Fonterra's General Manager for Transport Logistics, Barry McCole. Feedback already coming in on that, and it is very welcome. I'm not a management, but common sense dictates that when this issue arose, Fonterra should have contacted the union, told them of the problem, and asked how we should collectively handle this. Best wishes, Trudy. Thank you, Trudy. You can text us on 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz if you have feedback on any of the subjects we're covering tonight. A secret witness in one of the country's most high-profile murder trials says he told the truth in court, lied in a subsequent affidavit and a television interview, and is now telling the truth again. Now, witness C told David Tamaheri's murder trial that David Tamaheri confessed to sexually assaulting Swedish tourists Heidi Parkinen and Sven Irvan Hoglen, killing them and dumping their bodies at sea. He then recanted that evidence. Now he's on trial himself at the High Court in Auckland, where he denies 8 charges of perjury and 1 of attempting to pervert the course of justice. He took the stand in his own defence today, and our Auckland court reporter Edward Gay was there.
Witness C told the court that he worked out with David Tamaheri while the two were in jail. He said Tamaheri told him he bumped into the Swedish tourists at a picnic area in the Coromandel.
He told me that he had taken the Swedish guy, Mr. Hoglen, I think it is, took him away under the pretense of showing him the Coromandel Peninsula area. I think he basically said that at some stage he had knocked the guy off. And he said that he had disposed of the body out at sea.
Witness C later said Tamaheri had also confessed to sexually abusing the Swedes.
I was disgusted. I'm no saint, but I was disgusted. And I found I had difficulties at the time comprehending how he could be boasting of such things,
He said he approached a prison officer and later the police. He was moved around prisons for his safety and eventually gave evidence at trial. Tamaheri was convicted of the murders and sentenced to life. He continues to maintain his innocence. Witness C said 5 years after the trial, he was threatened by 2 prisoners, one armed with an iron pole and the other with a knife. They beat him and forced him to call Tamaheri's brother, former MP John Tamaheri, to recant his evidence and confirm his U-turn in an affidavit. Witness C was asked why he signed the legal document if he knew it wasn't true.
I never thought at that stage that it would have been used in court. All right. There's only one thing on my mind at that particular time. It's keeping myself and my family safe.
Witness C said the threats continued and he was beaten in a prison yard. He said he felt as though he had a target on his back. He also confirmed he went on the Paul Holmes show and made the same claims under duress that he had lied at Tamaheri's trial. Under cross-examination from prosecutor Murray Gibson, Witness C refused to name the inmates who had threatened him, saying there would be further repercussions. Mr Gibson said the only evidence of the threats came from Witness C.
I'm definitely not lying, I can guarantee that.
Well, that'll be a matter for the jury to determine.
Of course, yeah. And I'm also well aware it's your job to try and paint the blackest picture you possibly can of me in front of the jury.
Not at all.
Oh, yes, it is. It's a choke-only case.
Mr Gibson went on to question Witness C about how he had felt as he watched David Tamaheri give emotional evidence yesterday about the accusations.
You knew he was relating evidence that you'd falsely given against.
No, I didn't give false evidence at all.
Did you feel any pangs of guilt at all yesterday?
No, not at all. Oh, I can tell you one feeling I was having was about Heidi Parkinen and the horrific things that he had done to her.
Mr Gibson then directly challenged witness C.
This is your time to man up. Here's your opportunity to tell us that and confirm that you fabricated your evidence in that trial. Here's your opportunity.
Not at all. Everything I said at that trial, told to me by him.
Tomorrow the jury will hear closing addresses from the prosecution and defence before Justice Fata sums up the case. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi ko Edward Gaiaho.
Let's head to Christchurch, where there was heckling and hollering at the city's largest polytechnic today as a former Rebuild Minister, Jerry Brownlee, showed up for what's believed to be his only political debate of this election campaign. The National MP, who was filling in for Christchurch Central candidate Nicky Wagner, faced off against former lawyer and Labour candidate for Christchurch Central, Duncan Webb, as well as candidates from the Green and Opportunities parties. Our reporter Logan Church was there.
Hundreds of Cantabrians crowded into the Ara Institute to eyeball the city's political candidates. One of the hottest topics was insurance on properties damaged in the Christchurch and Kaikoura earthquakes. Many in the audience asked Jerry Brownlee, the minister responsible for the Earthquake Commission, why insurance payouts have taken so long to settle. Among them, Christchurch resident Jerry Larson.
I'd like to know which, if any, of the parties are prepared to make a real attempt at putting in performance laws requiring insurance companies to pay up in a timely manner.
Labour's Duncan Webb said Christchurch homeowners have been badly let down by both the government and insurance companies.
The behaviour of insurance companies in Christchurch after the earthquakes has been absolutely woeful. The Labour Party is committed to breaking the deadlock, and it has said it will set up a tribunal that can give damages for undue delays. I want to go further. If I get into Parliament, I'll be advocating for a 2-year limit on settlement of claims and penalties thereafter.
But Mr Brownlee said people needed to read their insurance contracts after the earthquake.
Remember that all insurance is in fact a contract between the two parties, and that one lesson I think that has come out of the Christchurch earthquakes, and certainly has for me personally, is it's a good idea to read your insurance contracts. We found, like, oh, you find this amusing? It's a fact. I do not support a new arrangement that would break contract law in this country. It would be a disaster, not only for here, but for through the whole country.
Thanks very much, Jerry.
The government's approach to housing also came under fire, with one audience member challenging Mr Brownlee on the use of the word crisis.
Could he comment, is the word crisis an appropriate word to use for when we're talking about poverty, inequality and housing?
I don't agree with you that we've got a crisis in housing, for example. No, I knew everyone would react that way, but let me put it to you this way. Where is the one place in New Zealand where housing prices are static and where rents are falling? It's right here in Christchurch. The reason that's not happening across the rest of the country is because those local authorities will not use the tools that they've got, that they've been given by central government, to make that happen. And I've got people here saying rubbish. Well, it's not rubbish, it's plain fact.
But Duncan Webb told the crowd that something had to be done fast.
I cannot believe that there's a suggestion there's no housing problem in Christchurch. When it was snowing in Christchurch, there was a guy sleeping in a doorway in New Regent Street. No country in the world should be proud of that. That we are rich enough to look after those people. There is a problem in Christchurch. I bought a house that was worth about 4 times my income when I was a young lawyer. On the same adjusted income today, it would be 12 times my income. That is a crisis.
Mr Brownlee also faced questions about his lack of attendance at a previous debate in his own electorate.
Last week on Wednesday, there was a meeting just like this for the ILM electorate. Doug was there, even though TOP doesn't have a candidate running for our electorate. You weren't, and you didn't send a representative. Why not?
Well, look, I personally, if you want my candid view, if you look at this audience today and you looked at the applause that was given at the start for various candidates come here, it's pretty clear that what candidates do at those meetings is bring along their own supporters to make sure that they get a good hearing. So what I yeah, I agree with you. I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. I'm totally agreeing with you, right?
At the end of the day, it was handshakes all around, but the battle lines have been drawn in Christchurch Central. And National's Nikki Wagner has 3.5 weeks before voters get to decide if she'll hang on to the seat. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Logan Church.
Let's stay on the campaign trail. Political party leaders are racing around the country trying to win over voters as the election campaign heats up. The public gets to see and hear snippets of what they're up to in the media, but what are they actually doing all day? In the first of two pieces on the Labour and National Party leaders, our deputy political editor Chris Bramwell pulls back the curtain on what a day on the road with Jacinda Ardern is really like.
Yeah, we might hang out here. Yep. Coffee or tea or water?
It's 7:30 in the morning and Jacinda Ardern has just arrived at RNZ in Auckland for her morning report interview with Guy on Espiner.
Well, the Labour leader Jacinda Ardern is with us now in the Auckland studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
It's not the first media interview of the day.
Joining me now is Labour leader Jacinda Ardern. Nice to have you. Nice to see you. Grant's going to love being called a big...
Labour leader Jacinda Ardern is with us this morning. Tēnā koe.
Good morning, Morena.
Do you believe that?
What time did you get up this morning? 5 a.m. Yeah. That's pretty early. Yeah. No, that's the routine at the moment. Yeah, not every morning's 5, but every morning's pretty early at the moment. Yeah. And do you have breakfast before you leave? No, not that early. If it's 6, I probably would, but 5, yeah, not quite ready to face the full brunt of the morning yet. So you're doing all these media interviews with no breakfast? I've got a banana and a protein shake in the car, so yeah.
It's the start of a long day for the Labour leader, but it's typical of life on the road during an election campaign. After a stop at another media outlet, it's off to Western Springs College.
Please welcome with a warm round of applause, Jacinda Ardern.
The school hall is packed to the gills and students are stoked to have a policy announcement that relates directly to them made at their school.
Every time I've been on campus, people have rightly raised with me that...
Outside the hall, Jacinda Ardern spends 10 minutes answering questions from reporters about Labour's plan to raise student allowances and bring forward the first year of its free post-secondary education. Then she's into the Crown car and off to a TVNZ event to be interviewed by intermediate school students before arriving at Auckland Airport for a midday flight to Gisborne. Students from Gisborne Intermediate School wait impatiently inside the terminal for the Labour leader to get off the plane. After a quick chat with the students and their teachers, it's into another Crown car to be whisked away to the Eastern Institute of Technology.
Do you play around with cars at home or...
Jacinda Ardern has an easy manner and a ready smile, so students warm to her immediately, even though many have no idea who she is.
Do you know who she is?
No. I know that she's in the Labour, but yeah.
After a tour of various parts of the Polytech, including the ubiquitous high-vis vest and not very flattering hairnets, Jacinda Ardern does a quick speech to party supporters in the student hub. Then, after another quick media stand-up, she heads to the suburb of Kaiti to talk housing with a group for an hour. Then the final official engagement of the day is with students and teachers to talk about suicide and bullying.
Feel free to ask me absolutely anything that you want. You know, don't feel like you need to hold back. Ask me anything you want about what we do.
While that's the final item on the official diary, Jacinda Ardern squeezes in a live radio interview en route to her partner's parents' house, where she's staying the night and doing her weekly Facebook Live chat. Tony and Perry Gayford are relaxed about the sudden entourage of people appearing on their doorstep, including security detail and fancy Crown cars.
So do you girls want anything? Drink, tea, coffee, wine? Oh.
They're super friendly, offering tea, coffee or wine, and then exclaiming they should have cooked dinner for everyone when asked for a restaurant recommendation in town. Ms Ardern's nephew doesn't care about the sudden influx of smartly dressed visitors who appear out of nowhere. He's just happy to see Auntie Cinda.
Who's that? Theo?
Hey Theo, how are you? Sorry, I was just on the radio.
No, that's all right, that's all right.
Theo!
I have a card for you.
You have a card? Did you make me a card?
Yeah, and for Clark.
And for Clark. Uncle Clark's not with me.
Labour's former deputy, Annette King, who has been accompanying Jacinda Ardern a lot on the campaign trail, arrives to host the Facebook Live in the Gayfords Lounge. They run through some of the questions that have come through already, and staff back in Wellington point out the rowing picture in the back of the shot, saying it looks a bit like National's campaign ad from the last election. Jacinda Ardern isn't bothered though and says she'll address that in her introduction.
And it's been pointed out to us that it may look like we're sitting under the inspiration for the National Party rowing ad for this time. I thought I'd just call it out.
Yes,
yeah,
but that actually is us rowing in the same direction.
And possibly, and quite possibly winning that race as well.
I'd say so.
Before we kick off...
It's now almost 7 o'clock at night, and when the Facebook Live is done, there's still work to do. Emails and a short video explaining this morning's education policy announcement. It's a hectic and long day, but Jacinda Ardern will have to keep that up for the next 24 days, and if she wins, she'll have to do it for at least another 3 years after that. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Chris Bramall aho.
And Chris will be going on the campaign trail with Bill English too. 40 seconds before 6. I know some fat politicians who should be stood down, so why aren't they? Asked Keith. After the Fonterra story, I'm a truck driver. It's your work safe, John. It's taken away personal responsibility. Now directors go to jail if I get badly hurt at work. Did it take 3 weeks after putting them off the road before they offered a plan? They've worked for 7 and 11 years, never been mentioned before, suddenly stood down. Doesn't employment law say they have to show they've followed proper process, i.e. discuss, warn someone before sudden change? Asked Patricia. Lots and lots of feedback on the truck drivers taken off because they weigh too much, according to Fonterra.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. Housing New Zealand says it can't guarantee an Auckland family of 7 with severe health needs will be able to stay in their state house until eligibility assessments are complete. The agency has given notice of eviction to the Morris family following the death of the registered tenant, Kate Morris. The family spokesperson, Rewa Morris, met with Housing New Zealand today, along with Moiata Morris.
She provides the information of the other children, and then it will be conclusive, and then they will be able to assess it at that point. It still has a positive outlook.
Rewa Morris says there's no guarantee yet they can stay in the house. Housing New Zealand says it must balance a compassionate approach with recognising others in need who are waiting for a social house. Moko Rangitoherere's mother has made a plea to others suffering domestic violence to get out and never look back. Nicola Dalipaki was giving evidence in the Rotorua District Court today at the inquest into the death of her 3-year-old son. Moko was beaten to death by Tanya Shayla and her partner David Hairewa in August 2015. Ms Dalipaki told the court that leaving Moko and his sister with Shayla was a last resort while she was at Auckland Starship Hospital caring for another child. She says she was trying to find a safe place for her family after a violent relationship with Moko's father and assumed Shayla was safe because they'd known each other for 15 years. She says other women in similar situations need to have an emergency plan, ask for help and not feel ashamed. A prisoner accused of raping 3 of his cellmates has told a jury no sexual contact was made at all. William Katipa denies 14 charges, including sexual violation and threatening to kill while in prison. Before he took the stand in the High Court in Auckland today, his lawyer, Scott Clark, told the jury it was up to the Crown to prove his guilt and that if there was any reasonable doubt, they'd have to find him not guilty. Describing Katipa as a humble man who was actively involved in education in prison, Mr Clark said his client was puzzled by the allegations. Giving evidence this afternoon, Katipa said no sexual contact was made with any of the 3 complainants while he shared a cell with them. He says he did cover a peephole into the cell, but says that was commonly done to allow privacy for things like going to the toilet. A witness in one of the country's most high-profile murder trials has been told to man up and tell the truth. Witness C told David Tamihere's 1990 murder trial Tamihere had confessed to sexually assaulting Swedish tourists Heidi Parkinen and Sven Urban Hoglund, killing them and dumping their bodies at sea. He recanted that evidence 5 years later, Edward Gay reports.
Witness C is now charged with perjury and attempting to pervert the course of justice, charges he denies. But today, under cross-examination from prosecutor Murray Gibson, he was encouraged to man up and tell the truth. Witness C said he was telling the truth. He said he only recanted his evidence after he was beaten and he and his family were threatened. He said he told Tamahere's trial what the accused man had told him inside prison. Tamahere served 20 years in prison for the murder of the Swedish tourists, but maintains his innocence. Atu I te ko te mātua ko eput hau.
The union for 2 Fonterra truck drivers says the men were humiliated after being stood down from their jobs for being overweight. The drivers, who've collectively worked for the company for 20 years, have been told they cannot drive again until they lose weight. First Union is calling it unacceptable. But Fonterra's General Manager of Transport Logistics, Barry Moko, has told Checkpoint health and safety issues are involved.
The truck manufacturers have said to us there is a weight rating limit on the seats that your drivers are in, and if you are beyond that weight, the safety functions of the seat may not necessarily perform to standard in a serious accident.
Barry Moko of Fonterra. First, it was scuppered by the courts. Now, the final nail has been hammered into Hawke's Bay's Ruitaniwha Dam project. The Regional Council unanimously agreed today to withdraw its support for the controversial scheme. Anne-Marie May reports.
There was wide opposition to the project, which would have required a land swap between the Council and the Department of Conservation. The Supreme Court put an end to that last month, ruling the swap was unlawful. Federated Farmers is disappointed with today's decision, saying it leaves questions about the region's future water storage capability. However, its Hawke's Bay President Will Foley says it's also good to have some finality after confusing messages from the council. This is Anne-Marie May.
It's 6:05. Sport and Silver Ferns coach Janine Southby is demanding a much stronger defensive effort from her side in tonight's Quad Nations netball test against England in Auckland. New Zealand wobbled to a 63-56 win over South Africa in their opening match in Brisbane at the weekend. Southby says a more stifling defensive approach has been the focus in training this week.
Attacking wise, there was some stuff that we worked on last week which we felt we executed pretty well, and we'll be looking to keep pushing that forward. And defensively, big step up this week from everyone, and just that ability to do our own jobs first and foremost, which we didn't do as well against South Africa.
Janine Southby. Third seed Roger Federer has survived a first-round scare at the US Tennis Open, beating 19-year-old American Frances Tiafoe 4-6, 6-2, 6-1, 1-6, 6-4 in a 5-set thriller. Earlier, top seed and world number 1 Rafael Nadal dismissed unseeded Serbian Dusan Lajic in straight sets to stay on course for a potential semi-final showdown with Federer. The National Rugby League's investigation into salary cap breaches at Manly could drag on until after the finals series, according to the club's chairman, Scott Penn. The NRL Integrity Unit has been looking at Manly's books for almost 2 months since the New South Wales Organised Crime Commission uncovered apparent secret player payments. Penn is adamant the club will soon be cleared of match fixing by the police. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Peggy Ravel reports in from a very hot and bothered Canada. Episode 4 of Bang looks at sex and relationships after the baby arrives. And in the change to our advertised program, our drama hour is given over to real-life action and humour at the Aro Valley Meet the Candidates election gathering, emceed by yours truly. Grassroots politics, Wellington style, on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from afternoon news at 7. On RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland and Auckland, occasional showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms today. Coromandel Peninsula, Waikato, Waitomo, Taumarunui, Bay of Plenty and Taupo. Rain with heavy falls spreading south, turning to showers this evening. Isolated thunderstorms possible about Coromandel until tonight. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, cloud and occasional drizzle spreading into Gisborne by evening, turning to showers with possible thunderstorms about the ranges tomorrow. Taranaki, Taihape, Whanganui to Kapiti. Cloud increasing and scattered rain spreading southwards this afternoon and evening. Nelson and Bulla, cloudy, scattered light rain, mainly from tonight. Wide at Upper Wellington, Marlborough, Canterbury and coastal Otago, cloudy with periods of drizzle or rain from this evening. Westland, Fiordland and the remainder of Otago and Southland, fine today. Mainly fine tomorrow with areas of morning fog and widespread high cloud. The Chatham Islands today, cloudy periods and occasional drizzle. Tomorrow, rain with some heavy falls, easing to a few showers in the afternoon. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina, and thank you everyone for being with us. In the next 22 minutes or so, we are back in Houston. One of the BBC's greats, John Campbell, is with Donald Trump as he visits and the UN Security Council tries to handle North Korea. That's coming up, but let's go back to the brutal death of Moko Rangitohereri, which obviously horrified the country. The 3-year-old died after suffering prolonged and sadistic abuse at the hands of his caregivers Tanya Shayla and David Hairewa 2 years ago this month. Today, the inquest began into Moko's death in the Rotorua District Court in front of Coroner Wallace Spain. The toddler's mother made an emotional plea there today. Our reporter Joanna McKenzie has been covering the inquest and joins us from Rotorua. Hi Joanna, this is tough work. What message did Moko's mother have for women like her living in violent relationships?
Kia ora, John. Yes, she was asked if there was a message that she had, and she took a moment. It was an incredibly emotional and tense period of giving evidence, and she said she wanted to get the message out that people need to plan, be organised if they need to have an emergency plan. And she also wanted to say, don't be afraid to ask us for help and don't be ashamed. She said she was still accepting that she felt shame for what had happened in her violent relationship that she had had. And she said she didn't want anyone else to go through what she'd been through. Never look back, she said, and anything is possible. You just have to don't look back and move forward. It was a very tense and difficult period for her. She was asked about her relationship with Tanya Shayla, who of course was sentenced to 17 years in prison last year. And what emerged was a relationship where they had known each other for 15 years, since Moko's mother was 16. Shayla had been a kindergarten teacher, so this is why she assumed, and she used that word, I assumed they would be safe. Which is why when it became to the last resort, Nicola Dalipaki was in Auckland at Starship Hospital with her other child. She was desperate. The hospital staff had said, you can't keep your children with you on the ward because she'd been sneaking them in to sleep in the ward with her. They said, you can't do that anymore. So it was literally a last resort. She phoned up Tanya Shayla and said, can they stay with you? And she said yes. She didn't have anywhere else for them to go. The police earlier in the day had had given evidence and had a text between the pair which showed that Shayla was under pressure herself. She had 4 children. She said in a text she had a lot on her plate as well, although she understood that Nicola Dalipaki had a lot on her plate as well, and did ask her to sort this situation out soon. But it came out that they had known each other for so long. They'd spent a Christmas together. They'd had barbecues together. They'd given each other's children Christmas presents. So I think Moko's mother was trying to explain to the court why she thought it was safe to leave her children there.
Moko's paternal grandmother was also a witness today. Joanna, what did she say?
Well, she was a very incredibly emotional witness statement. She said that she had cried and screamed for Moko, but nobody had listened. She had phoned, the children had a lawyer, she had phoned the lawyer, she had phoned the agency. She'd offered to have the children, but that offer had twice been rejected by Moko's mother because of other circumstances pertaining to other court orders. So she wasn't able to have them. And she said, I had concerns about Tanya Shayla. She said she would not have left her children with Tanya Shayla. She had concerns. She had told what was then Child, Youth and Family, she says, about these concerns, but nobody listened. She said nobody was listening to her and nobody was listening to Moko when he cried for help either.
Our reporter Joanna McKenzie, who is covering the inquest and was joining us from Rotorua, where it is taking place in the District Court. Thank you very much indeed. Joanna, it's 12.5 minutes past 6. Authorities in Houston have imposed a nighttime curfew on residents as a massive rescue operation continues. Tropical Storm Harvey is still bringing catastrophic flooding, and that's the word being used by experts to parts of Texas. At least 11 people have been killed. 30,000 have been forced from their homes in the greater Houston area. 120 centimetres of rain has fallen, setting a new rainfall record for America's fourth largest city. 2 dams are overflowing, and almost every river and stream have breached their banks. President Donald Trump has been visiting the state to survey the damage, although he didn't go to Houston so as not to distract from the rescue operations. He said the storm looks set to be one of the costliest natural disasters in US history. The BBC's John Campbell is following the president.
A commander-in-chief determined to show that he is in command. President Trump arrived in Corpus Christi this lunchtime, the city where Hurricane Harvey made landfall. And the crowds had gathered outside the fire station to hear him. He'd come to offer comfort and support.
Thank you, everybody.
Though it sounded more like a campaign rally.
This is historic, it's epic what happened, but you know what? It happened in Texas, and Texas can handle anything. Thank you all, folks. Thank you. Thank you.
And with a flourish, he produced the flag of the Lone Star State. To the crowd's delight. Earlier, he met the Texas Governor Greg Abbott and praised the cooperation between state and federal government.
We won't say congratulations. We don't want to do that. We don't want to congratulate. We'll congratulate each other when it's all finished.
Contrast that with 12 years ago and the disastrous handling of Hurricane Katrina and this utterly tone-deaf comment from then President Bush to his emergency relief coordinator.
And Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job. The FEMA director's working 24 hours.
Actually, it was one heck of a mess. Nearly 2,000 people died, and in New Orleans it was particularly bad. There was an evacuation, but it seemed that all those who were left behind were black. President Bush's reputation wouldn't recover. The response to Harvey has been more sure-footed so far. Across this vast state, damage is being assessed. We went to La Grange.
So how far has it moved?
Only close there.
So your home has moved across the street?
Uh-huh.
This is just one small town in Texas, and it's estimated that some 500 homes have been destroyed here.
We're still in the foothills of this disaster. Thousands will remain homeless for months to come. There's an economic reckoning to be had. Will Congress agree to fund the rebuilding? And the biggest question of them all, as Louisiana stands next in the path, has Tropical Storm Harvey done his worst, or is there more devastation to come?
That's the BBC's John Campbell. Let's go to New York, where the UN Security Council has given North Korea a bit of a slap, condemning it over its latest missile test, but stopping short of further sanctions. The 15-member council met in an emergency session to discuss yesterday's missile launch, which flew over northern Japan before crashing into the Pacific. Those extraordinary scenes of people receiving missile warnings in Japan. North Korea says it conducted the test to counter US and South Korean military drills near its border and as a first step in military action in the Pacific to, quote, contain the US territory of Guam. Here's the BBC's UN correspondent, Bill Hayton.
This was an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council just 3 weeks after imposing new sanctions on North Korea over its missile and nuclear weapons programs. The Council had to face Pyongyang's defiance. All 15 members wanted to present a united face.
The Security Council condemns the DPRK for its outrageous actions and demands that the DPRK immediately cease all such actions. The Security Council stresses that these DPRK actions are not just a threat to the region, but to all UN member states.
That apparent unity was emphasised by the American delegation, the main author of the statement. But the Council could only agree to implement existing measures against North Korea. No new ones were promised.
We are all denouncing North Korea's outrageous act against another UN member state, Japan. We are all demanding North Korea stop any future missile launches. We are all demanding North Korea abandon its nuclear weapons. North Korea has violated every single Security Council resolution and violated international law.
At the same time, the US is emphasising military deterrence with large-scale war games in South Korea and the deployment of the THAAD missile defence system. That was directly criticised by China.
China stands opposed to any chaos or war on the peninsula. Enhancing military deployment on the peninsula won't help towards achieving the goal of denuclearization or regional stability. The deployment of the THAAD system in Northeast Asia severely jeopardizes regional strategic balance, undermining the strategic security interests of all regional countries, including China. It will further escalate tension on the peninsula, making the issue more complicated and intractable.
UN sanctions were first imposed on North Korea after its nuclear test 11 years ago. So far, they haven't stopped the country's military ambitions.
No, a very difficult situation for the UN to manage. That's Bill Hayton from UN headquarters in New York, coming up to 6:19. The Hawke's Bay Regional Council has unanimously voted today to pull its financial support from the failed Ruataniwha Dam project. There's been intense opposition to the $900 million irrigation scheme, but its biggest hurdle came last month when the Supreme Court stopped a land swap deal that would have allowed protected conservation land to be flooded. The council has spent more than $20 million on the project and is writing off a $14 million debt. Anne-Marie May filed this report.
Federated Farmers is bitterly disappointed with the decision, saying it leaves big questions about the drought-prone region's ability to store water for irrigation. But its Hawke's Bay President Will Foley says at least it's brought an end to the confusing situation of having a council opposed to the dam but still continuing to fund it.
We have a positive and a definite decision now. Farmers can know exactly where they're heading from now and can make other decisions in terms of investment on farm or elsewhere, as opposed to hanging on and waiting for Ruataniwha to happen.
Mr Foley says farmers may have to band together now to find another solution.
Farmers will have to create a dam on farm and either collect water naturally or pump into it during the winter and then irrigate from there. And depending on the size, it may be that a group of farmers in one place all invest in one dam that services 2, 3 or 4 farms in the vicinity.
Will Foley says that would be like having several Ruataniwha dams on a much smaller scale. The council-controlled company that holds the rights for the scheme will be able to sell any assets and intellectual property if someone comes up with a new plan to try and make the project work. The council chairman, Rex Graham, isn't keen on that option.
We don't want them to go out there and sell the idea because we think they've already tried to do that and failed. The council and the Hawke's Bay ratepayers do not want to invest any more time and energy in this project.
Rex Graham confirmed the council's investment company is still holding consents for the project, which are costing about $100,000 a year. For Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
Let's go back to politics in a very real way. 3 nights a week, a grandmother of 7 is hitting the streets of South Auckland to feed the homeless. And in the 4 years Debbie Munro has been helping fill the bellies of those who need it in Manurewa, she's seen an explosion in the numbers of people doing it tough. So she's encouraging the people she feeds to also get out and vote. May Heron spent some time with her.
There's a little bit left in there.
On this night, there's a bite in the air. It's cold. As I pull out my RNZ mic, the people around look at me very suspiciously. Just ignore her, one lady says. They all go back to sipping hot drinks and eating food. This woman is clearly in charge.
I'm either called Nana, Debbie or Auntie. Oh, there's a couple that call me Mum and I crack up laughing because they're about my age and I'm going, come here, son. And
Debbie Munro reckons she's just an ordinary stay-home nana, bringing up 7 grandkids. But not every grandmother hits the cold streets to dole out donated food to those who need it.
And you meet these guys and you kind of fall in love with them and just want to help and just seeing them eat and smile and... Are you all right, Terence? Are you sure? Okay.
They're almost more children to you.
Well, that one is. I have a soft spot for that one. I have a soft spot for all of them, don't I? Yeah.
When Debbie started 4 years ago, she was feeding 5 homeless people on average a night. Now she sees up to 35.
I mean, we've got a builder, we've got somebody who does computers, we've got a lady who was in a car accident and lost her family. We've got people who have fallen through the system who have had so many broken promises by income support and the government, and that they're over it, they're over the broken promises.
Life isn't easy on the streets of Manurewa.
Do you think you'll vote according to the people that you see out here on the streets?
Actually, I haven't even made my mind up, to be honest. I'm going to walk in and make my mind up on the day, because quite frankly, I wouldn't vote for any of them.
What would influence you to vote for someone?
If they actually got off their butts right now and said, Debbie, we'll fund a building for you for 3 months. Let's give it a trial. I'm betting we start up an all-night cafe.
At this point, a man drives up to the curb and starts yelling at his 12-year-old daughter to get in the car. Without flinching, Debbie takes down the number plate and gets a friend to inform the police.
Yeah, that young girl turned up at my house today, ran away from home, told me that her dad beat, and I rang the police, which means that he'll go home and bash the shit out of her.
What did the police say?
Not much. Is there proof?
It isn't pretty, says Debbie, but this is her community. A community which she encourages to look out for each other.
We've got maybe 5 or 6 in the motel, so they let everyone come. They get caught, everyone loses out. But they're doing the most natural thing, taking them in and getting them off the street at night. And they get penalised for it. I mean, I even know that some of them have lost their benefits for helping people. How does that happen?
Most of the homeless weren't keen to talk about their situation or what they need. But 23-year-old Roy Mataraira was keen to tell me that her local Work and Income office enrolled her to vote.
It's important because, you know, the world will change if you vote.
Debbie Munro says she's also been encouraging people to vote.
Trying to talk to them about voting, oh, I don't want a bloody vote. I said, but we need your vote. We need your vote.
For a change?
Yeah, for a change. We need a change. Lord help us if they get in again. We're screwed. I mean, look. You know, and they still sit there and say there's no such thing as home. Well, there is.
Debbie's been asked by local businesses to stop feeding people on the street because they think she's encouraging homelessness. She's been yelled at, threatened, attended countless community meetings, and she's tired. But Debbie Munro says she won't give up.
And if somebody said to me 4 years ago I'd still be doing this 4 years, I'd probably laugh at them and go, yeah, whatever. But the more barriers we come across makes me more stubborn, makes me... I won't quit. I mean, we're here until, even if there's only one homeless person, we will still come down and we will still feed them.
Kei tamaki makoro mō te hōtaka o te ata ko Meihiran aho.
26 minutes past 6 on Checkpoint. An epic voyage through space is about to come to an end. After its 13-year mission to Saturn, the Cassini spacecraft has been transmitting its final pieces of data before it's destroyed in about 2 weeks. The data, as we say at Radio New Zealand, shows the planet's spectacular rings are younger than expected, about 120 million years, meaning they were created after the birth of the solar system. This is fascinating stuff. The BBC science correspondent Rebecca Morell reports.
Instantly recognisable, Saturn and its spectacular rings. The Cassini spacecrafts revealed this planet in incredible detail, from its hexagonal North Pole to its ring system and even an aurora. But this mission's very nearly at its end. Cassini's been in space for 20 years. It set down a probe, spotted plumes on one of Saturn's moons and discovered colossal storms. But now it's running out of fuel. Its final days, though, will be crucial.
We've learnt so much, but in that process we've also raised many new questions. One of the things that we still don't understand about Saturn is simply how long its day lasts.
Over the last few months, Cassini's been exploring a region where no spacecraft has been before, swooping between Saturn and its rings. And in its final days, it will get closer still, giving us our best ever view of the planet, revealing its atmosphere and what lies beneath its thick clouds. But these last dives could also show us what's hidden within its rings, including a mysterious object nicknamed Peggy.
We noticed this smudge right at the edge of the A-ring.
The blurry speck was spotted by Carl Murray in 2013 on his mother-in-law Peggy's birthday, and the name stuck. The ball of dust, more than a mile wide, is either a moon being born or one in its death throes. And this is his last chance to find out.
We need to understand what object Peggy really is. We've only got literally now a matter of days. Our last look at Peggy will be on September 14th, and I can't wait to see those images.
Time's running out, but this spacecraft will go out with a bang. Its last manoeuvre will be a death dive into Saturn's atmosphere, bringing this blockbuster mission to a close.
That was Rebecca Morrell. Our cat's called Peggy. She'll be delighted. She would have been looking up bewildered as someone kept saying her name on the radio. Cassini will make the last of 22 farewell dives between the planet's rings and Saturn's surface. Who designed something with the ability to do this? On September 15th, it will then burn up as it heads straight into the planet's crushing atmosphere. Goodbye, Cassini. But it is going to make its last dives and try and get some more information about Peggy. That brings Checkpoint to an end for tonight. Lots of email feedback around. It's funny what really engages people, and tonight the story du jour has been Fonterra and its truck drivers. By and large, people are thinking, yes, it's good to look after those men, but boy, Fonterra maybe could have done it a little bit more delicately and sensitively and better. But thank you for your feedback. You can text us 2101. You can email us checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We really do enjoy hearing from you. On behalf of our excellent team who work very hard to bring you this program, thank you for being with us. We will leave you with the James, aka Lawrence Arabia theme, and we will be back tomorrow night at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Two of the country's largest DHBs, Waikato and Auckland, say they're struggling with budget targets. Housing New Zealand says it can't guarantee an Auckland family of 7 can keep their state house without more assessment. Moko Rangitoherere's mother has made a plea to others suffering domestic violence to get out and never look back. The union for 2 Fonterra truck drivers says the men were humiliated after being stood down from their jobs for being overweight. The flooded Texas city of Houston has imposed an overnight curfew, and North Korea says the missile fired over Japan was the first step of military operations in the Pacific. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Kia ora, I'm Melody Thomas with a podcast series called Bang, exploring sex and relationships over a lifetime. Tonight we explore some of the ways parenthood affects intimacy.